and value. And the teaching of the Buddha teaches us that all beings, no matter who they are, have the potential to awaken to their own nature, and that they don't know this. And not knowing this, they wander around seeking external sources of value and external sources of validation, and finding that those external sources of value and validation fall short or don't last. And in a way, the cycle of looking outside for validation and fulfillment is unsatisfying. The Buddha called it samsara, like an ocean. You just go round and round and round. With no compass, you could end up doing circles in an ocean and never find your way to shore. So this is why I think the ocean analogy of the ocean of suffering, or the ocean of cyclic existence that the Buddha taught about, is very apt. It's a very apt metaphor. But because we have the sense that happiness and the causes of happiness are out there somewhere, out there, then because of that, we aim outward. We don't even think twice. We don't even think twice, because our immediate feedback from the world through our five senses, and our immediate feedback from the world through our thinking processes, tell us that happiness is out there. We have to go out and get it. And so as a result, we make an assumption about our lives that our value and worth are out there also. Our value as human beings and as people is out there also. And so because of this assumption we make when we're very small, we, through our entire lives, become outwardly focused. And the world we're dropped into the middle of facilitates this. We're sent to school. We're told we have to be useful. We're told we have to behave. We're told there are rules. And we are told that there's a society that we can fit into that then relies on us obeying rules and being useful. So we're dropped into the middle of this situation where we already have the assumption that external things are what bring happiness, and external things provide our value as humans. And then we're dropped into that, and then we're taught, yes, that's how it is. And yes, you too can have all of these wonderful things if you just do what we say. And so then we, at least we stay, if we stay within the rules of society, there is one benefit, and that is that we stay out of prison. If we stay out of prison, then we have a lot more chance to make contact with different philosophicals and different philosophical and spiritual points of view that might actually allow us the space to question this cycle and to question the idea that value comes from outside of us. But often for many of us, that questioning about where our value comes from comes a little bit later in life. Sometimes it comes in childhood, but sometimes it comes later on as we mature and begin to put into perspective the early events of our life. Once we can look back on the early events of our life and how we were dropped into this situation and how we were trained, once we can see that with a little bit of distance, we can begin to see how our assumptions may not have been correct. Reason I say this is because a lot of people come to learn about Buddhism and they come to learn about meditation. This is my experience. A lot of them come because they have experienced some kind of misfortune. As Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche once said to me, he said, people don't come to Dharma because they're having a good time. They come to Dharma because something is complicating their lives, something painful has happened, and they don't know how to cope because it doesn't fit in the framework that they have learned. And so when people, it usually is one of two or three different things. Either a misfortune has occurred, or a person has failed to get those external things that they wanted, that they felt would bring happiness, and they feel frustrated. Or oppositely, they have actually obtained those things that they thought would bring happiness, and they find that their happiness is not there. The happiness is not in the things that they own, and their value is not in the things that they own. And so they come feeling this disconnect between the system they were dropped into that told them happiness was external, the causes of happiness were external, and their own assumptions made since childhood that happiness comes from external things. So now we've hit, we as the human in this example have hit a moment of self-reflection, and we've begun to question the system. And once we've begun to question the system, then we begin to search. First we question, and then we search. We search through books and by listening to teachings and by listening to friends and so forth. We look for those pieces of a new inner philosophy that will actually speak to us and will tell us where we went wrong. Where did we go wrong exactly? Where was our assumption about the world incorrect? Where was it wrong? And if we're really fortunate, we will meet someone who says, it's okay, it's not your fault. You had this assumption, it's not your fault. You've had this assumption for a very long time. It's understandable, but you don't need to keep that assumption. You can actually begin to examine that assumption, see what's right about it and what's wrong about it, and then change it. Well, this is what happened for me when I met Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche just out of college, because I had had assumptions as a child about where happiness came from. And I had assumption about my value and where it came from, that it came from external things, how many things you owned and what other people thought of you and so forth and so on. And so when that was challenged during college, and I had some very unpleasant experiences, I said, wait a minute, maybe there's something not right about this. And then I had this, we were talking about aha moments before we started recording the talk. And in that discussion, it came up that we have these little aha moments of insight about our lives and about our spiritual development. And so I had a little aha moment when I met Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, and I saw a person who was very much at peace with himself, very much confident in his own value, who was able to help other people feel the same way. And I think to me, that was the moment that I said, oh, there must be something more to my life than these assumptions and this life I've dropped myself into. And so I began practicing meditation. And through practicing meditation, you find that all of those assumptions are merely thoughts. They're not actually rooted in anything except habit. And habit, as Trolloc Rinpoche once said, is somewhat involuntary, because it's an assumption that you've made for a very long time. And this habit of thinking this way, thinking that happiness is out there and that our value stems from something external. And so but when you start meditating and you learn the techniques of letting the mind come to rest, when you let the mind come to rest, what's the technique? You're taught the technique to observe the breath or listen to sound or look at a visual object and return your attention to that object again and again. When you start to do that, you notice that the thoughts that arise in your mind might distract you momentarily, but then you can remember that you're trying to meditate. You can touch the distraction, let it go, and then return your attention for a fresh start to the object of your attention, whether it's the breath or whatever. So when you do that, you begin to notice that your thoughts are discontinuous. They actually can disappear. And then once you realize that one thought can disappear, two thoughts can disappear, three and more, there's a certain aha moment that occurs for many people when they realize that all of their habits and all of their assumptions are made of just these components, these thoughts, which are fleeting, discontinuous, and can disappear. And so the idea of a thought being fleeting, discontinuous, and disappearing, it gives us an idea that there might be a way out of the cycle of assumption that we make about value and worth, and that there might be a source of worth that is not external. This is our first inkling of this. Our first inkling of this comes when we meditate. And so if we persist in meditation, then we become more accustomed to a different way of looking at ourselves. That at first we were a confused human being. Now we're a confused human being who has a skill, and that skill is meditating and letting go of thoughts. Now we're getting somewhere. And once we have made some progress in that, what does our teacher do then? Our teacher then aims us and teaches us the Buddhist philosophy. In the Buddhist philosophy, they teach us that every single person has a mind, and every single being has a mind, and that the mind's highest potential is that it can know itself and know itself fully and completely. And by knowing itself fully and completely, one can be liberated from suffering and its causes. We don't need to go too deeply into the Four Noble Truths here, although I try to give them a glance every talk I give. Remember the Four Noble Truths: suffering is part of life. That's what the Buddha taught after he gained his enlightenment. First thing he taught was suffering and its causes. Suffering's part of life. That's the first one. Suffering has a cause, and that cause is clinging and fixation. Third, because suffering has a cause, it has a solution. And the fourth is that there's a path that leads us out of suffering. So it's this second one, this cause of suffering being clinging and fixation, that was pivotal for me and my understanding. And so I like to talk about it a little bit. And that is that because we think of the cause of self-worth and the cause of happiness is external, we think that, then we grasp at those things, and those form our identity. However, the Buddha in his teaching is saying we have a different basis for value beyond what we feel, experience, and know and own. We have a source of value that's beyond all of those things. And if we can hold fast to that part of ourselves and cultivate that part of ourselves that is internal and is eternal. It's internal, eternal, and continuously perfect. Then we will actually make great progress in our search for happiness. So if we recognize that the cause of suffering is clinging and fixation, that's what the Buddha taught. The cause of suffering is not the neighbor. It's not the guy down the street. It's not your family members. The cause of suffering is our desperate clinging to things being the way we want them to be, and thinking that things are what they appear to be, and that those things, if they are what they appear to be, and we are what we think we are, then we must have them in order to be happy. That's the external philosophy. But the Buddha said something different. He said true happiness happens within the individual, and it comes from non-grasping. If grasping is the cause of suffering, then letting go is the cause of happiness. And so that's why we learn meditation, to learn how to let go, because we can make some early attempts. As my friend, one of my friends told me that the word fail means first attempt in learning. And so we make a lot of fails when we first try to figure this out. When Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche would tell us the parables of his life, he would frequently tell the parable, and but it was a true story. He would tell this story about one of the monks at his monastery, who, when he became a monk, thought that it was when he took his vows and so forth, he thought that this meant he shouldn't own anything. And so in a spasm of idealism, he gave away his shoes, he gave away his bowl that he ate his meals in, and so forth and so on. He gave away all of his possessions. But then later in the day, when he realized that he had no place to put his food, he had to actually, oh, I remember, the third thing was his spoon. He gave away his bowl and his spoon and his shoes. So then at mealtime, he realized that it wasn't such a practical thing to give those away. And so he had to go back and ask the person to give them back. And then he had to go somewhere and he couldn't go barefoot. So he had to go back and ask for his shoes back. So we may make a few imperfect attempts at trying to understand how to let go of something. And what we eventually find out is that letting go, like happiness, doesn't happen externally by giving away all of our possessions. Happiness comes from bringing our mind to a state and a state of peace and rest within itself. That's where lasting happiness comes from. Lasting happiness happens in the mind itself. And because of this truth, this fact that happiness comes from within us and is not dependent on external phenomena. I mean, everybody's seen this, right? In your life, you've met somebody who was very ill, but yet they were really happy. And of course, you've also met somebody who had everything in the world, but they're very sad. So external things do not bring happiness. And we know this, but until we start meditating and actually feel those moments of relief when we let go of things, when we let go of our thoughts, our emotions, our ideas, when we let go of those things and feel that relief, that's when we begin to see that it's true. We see that it's true for us. And then we're inspired by this understanding to go deeper and to meditate more and to learn more and to make contact with different meditation masters who can teach us to go farther. So Buddha nature. Buddha nature is the philosophical point that is taught in Buddhism that gives people a different source of self-worth. Our self-worth does not come from, in Buddhism, doesn't come from what we have or own. It comes from who we are, which is a Buddha in the making. We have the potential to become Buddhas ourselves. And therefore, each and every one of us has a value and a worth that is not earned. We don't have to earn that value or worth by fitting into some society idea of who we are and how we can be useful. We have intrinsic value that doesn't have to be earned. And therefore, every person has value. Every person is worthy of respect. Every person is worthy and deserving of love. Every person is deserving of happiness. And if we can then relate to other people as though they are right now how we were, not knowing that we had Buddha nature, we ran around in the hamster wheel, right, trying to get happiness. If we can see everybody else as having this intrinsic value, but not knowing it, what comes from that is compassion, empathy, and the wish for that person and that to be happy. And so to me, this core of self-worth then in that way is the wish, that is the understanding that we have Buddha nature and that we have a mind that can know itself and know itself completely. And that gives rise to empathy and compassion for all beings who haven't realized it. Now, just understanding this fact intellectually is not enough. It's great, but it's not enough, because we have all of these habits, remember? Remember our involuntary habits? The image of an ocean and its waves is being given here because the Buddha said the mind was vast and deep like an ocean, but all of our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and ideas and so forth are like waves on the top of that ocean. They crest and fall, but they're never separate from being water. And that means all of our thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas, habits, and memories, and so on, are like waves on the ocean of our mind, and that they may appear different when they heave out of the ocean, but eventually they fall back into the ocean and become part of the ocean again. But nowhere on that cycle of rising and disappearing does that wave ever depart from being water. It never departs from being water. Therefore, all of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions never depart from being our mind. And in not departing from being our mind, they have and partake of mind's basic nature, excuse me, which is described in Buddhist teachings as limitlessness. Some people use the word emptiness, but those of you who are familiar with His Eminence Thais Teacher Rinpoche's teachings know that he has a quibble with the word emptiness, because he thinks that people think it means zero. And so instead of calling it emptiness, he calls it limitlessness. So our mind is limitless. It doesn't have a color, doesn't have a shape, doesn't have a location, doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end, and so on. It's not a material thing. And yet, it's not nothing, because it knows and it experiences. And that's called its luminosity, clarity, and so on. So emptiness and luminosity, or limitlessness and luminosity, radiance, whatever word you like to use for the experiential aspect of mind. And so knowing that our mind is like this, we can begin through our training to recognize it everywhere. But I forgot one point I have to backtrack to. But I'll come back to limitlessness and luminosity in just a moment. But there is one piece I did forget. And I want to back into the issue or the question of compassion and love. A reason I want to do this is because my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, was very emphatic about this. He said that when we see that other people are just like us, and we see that they have value as we have value, and they have Buddha nature as we have Buddha nature, and that they don't know it as we did not know it, and so forth and so on, we need to develop and train in a compassion for them, because we're not Buddhas yet. We haven't realized our Buddha nature yet. We've realized that we have it, but we haven't actually developed all of the techniques and methods to totally uncover it. Therefore, we have to practice methods that are similar to goodness, that are similar to virtue and openness. And that comes from love and compassion, because where else does an openness of mind and an openness of heart and a non-grasping attitude, where else does it come from in our naturally occurring emotional landscape except through love? Love is where we go beyond ourselves, hold another as more important than ourselves, try to serve others, try to help others, try to uplift others. That's what love does. And so we take this naturally occurring love that's already in our lives, and we emphasize it through mind training, or in Tibetan, they call it lo jong. Lo means mind and jong means training. And what are we training in? We're training in bodhi citta. Bodhi means awakening, citta means mind, the mind that wants to wake up, bodhicitta. And it's the mind that recognizes that all beings have Buddha nature, but they don't realize it, and that they all are trying to get happiness externally, but failing. And by feeling compassion and love for this, we then imagine in compassion meditation, we build on our quiet sitting meditation. We build on it where we let go of all thoughts. remember that meditation we talked about, basic meditation, where we let go of thoughts and see that our thoughts are discontinuous? Well, the second phase of meditation is training the mind in thought. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but in the Tibetan path, it really works. We train our attitude to be more kind and loving through Lojong by imagining as we breathe out that we give happiness to beings, by imagining as we breathe in, we remove their suffering, and so on. By doing this, we train our attitude to be more kind, more loving, and we provide a more virtuous, shall we say, substrata in our mind. We condition our mind with virtue, very much the way we condition soil with water and sunlight to make that seed that's under the ground grow. So sorry for that backtrack, but I needed to go back and say that the value of love and compassion and the training in bodhicitta cannot be overstated, because otherwise we're trying to make a seed that has been dropped on dry ground. Our Buddha nature, we're trying to make it sprout. It's not going to sprout unless we give it everything it needs. The nourishment of being in the soil, the nourishment of the water and the sunlight. It needs to have all the things it needs to grow. And so bodhicitta makes that happen. Without bodhicitta, there's no Buddhahood. This is said in Buddhist teachings. But why is this? Because bodhicitta teaches us and trains us to think of others first. Because if we don't think of others first, we're thinking of ourselves first, and we're training in that, so that even our spiritual discipline could become self-centered. It could be so easy to sit and meditate in peace, that we could be that impatient meditator that Mingyur Rinpoche portrays in some of his teaching videos, the impatient meditator who is very selfish and sits there saying, "Don't bug me, I'm trying to rest in peace." And you know, his jokes about this are very apt. They strike the right spot, because the person without the training in bodhicitta could become that person. "Don't bug me," and so on. So so if we can take that second step of training the mind in love and compassion, we're farther ahead. And in fact, Buddhahood is impossible without it. Now, going on to the last part of what I wanted to say, which was that that at first, the knowledge that we have Buddha nature, it can be mind-blowing. Some people have told me the moment they recognized they had Buddha nature, they felt this like overwhelming responsibility, like, "Oh no, you mean I actually have to become a Buddha now? Oh no, you mean I have to give up the things that are part of my life? Oh no," you know, and then other people, though, feel very uplifted by that. They feel very uplifted because they feel, now I know what my purpose is. Now I know what my life is about. Now I know where I'm going. And they feel a confidence there. So but understanding is not enough. We have to continue practicing, and we have to practice meditation. And in practicing meditation, we make discoveries. And these discoveries are sometimes called experiences. We experience momentary freedom. We experience momentary understanding and clarity. We experience a momentary non-thought. We have moments of well-being and clarity and non-thought in our meditation. And this is Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said these experiences are the fruition of our positive karma. And as the fruition of positive karma, because most of our positive karma was accumulated with some selfish taint, you know, some stain, then it doesn't last. And so experiences expire pretty quickly after they happen. And that becomes discouraging unless you know that that's how they are. I mean, if you get a daylily and it blooms for a week, you're very surprised, because the name daylily, you see what I'm saying? It's like, you know, so if we understand that experiences fall apart and degrade because they're only temporary, then that allows us, but they allow us to see what's possible in our minds and in our lives. They allow us to see a moment of freedom ahead. And that if we keep practicing, then we will ripen our meditation from understanding through experience and on to realization. And these are the these are the three stages of how we understand our path and toward the realization of our Buddha nature. And so, but we have to, in that path, practice letting go at higher and higher and higher levels. And one of the ways to do this is by learning how the mind is when it is at rest. And there are lots of techniques to learn this. Meditation itself, shamatha meditation or tranquility meditation itself is one such method. When we allow our mind to come to rest on the breath, when one thought ends and another one hasn't yet begun, there's a gap. And we learn that that moment of non-conceptuality is okay. And we can actually rest there and allow ourselves to be there. And we can see that it is possible for us to be present with our mind without using it to think of anything. And then as we recognize this, then we begin to train in it. And our teachers teach us to train in allowing our mind to come to rest in the midst of activities. Here's an example. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, you should never let your mind come to rest while you're driving. Totally impractical, totally dangerous. He said, you should never try to let your mind come to rest while you're having a conversation. It's going to make things difficult. He said, but what you can do is you can allow your mind to come to rest when you are between tasks in your day. When you have completed one task, before you take up the next task, he said, just let your mind rest for a second. He said, the translator used the word flop or drop, like you're flopping in your easy chair at the end of a busy day. He said, nobody's going to know what you're doing. They'll just think you're being thoughtful for a moment. And then when that's over, you just go back and do your next task. He says, in doing this little technique of letting the mind drop between tasks, you're allowing the mind to be non-conceptual for a moment and to get closer, which gets us closer to the comfort with recognizing that our mind has always been like that, always will be like that, is possessed of purity and goodness in the midst of that, and so on. And so this training then, just knowing we have Buddha nature is not enough. We have to train. One of the ways of training is through the practice of Mahamudra, of which those two exercises that I gave were part, letting mind rest and bringing it to rest when you're between tasks. Another way to do it is to do deity meditation, where you visualize yourself as a Buddha or Bodhisattva, and your body is made of light and is empty. Oop, I use my blackboard incorrectly. Is empty, and yet it appears. There we go. People ask me, why don't you use PowerPoint? And I say, hey, I got a blackboard. I'm good. So on this side, we have emptiness. On this side, we have luminosity. And so when we meditate on ourselves as a Buddha or Bodhisattva that's empty inside, that's emphasizing mind's emptiness. When we meditate on our body as being made of light, that's mind's luminosity. That's according to both Bokar Rinpoche in his book, Chenrezig, Lord of Love, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who gave a teaching on this at KTD in 2006. He said, it's very hard for people straight out of the gate to meditate on the nature of their mind as emptiness and lucidity, or emptiness and luminosity. He said, but they can visualize themselves as Chenrezig, who is made of light, luminosity, and yet empty inside, emptiness. So he said, and then what do you do at the end? You dissolve everything into utter emptiness and let your mind rest there. So he said, all of these things are training. All of these things are training us to get comfortable with our mind as it really is. Because it's one thing to be told we have Buddha nature, and it's another to uncover it. And this is where the comments that we discussed before the talk today come in. Someone was talking about the idea of looking at one's emotional states, such as guilt or anxiety, and to be able to see mind's nature in the midst of these feelings, the feelings of guilt, the feelings of anxiety, and so on. And that being able to do that is a benefit, because it trains us in recognizing our Buddha nature. And then there was the other thread that came up in today's discussion, besides the idea of how to use thoughts and emotional feelings to train in one's Buddha nature. The other thing was the idea of phenomena or appearances. Phenomena or appearances being a method for training. And that's where the 17th century text comes in. I'll get to the 17th century text in just a minute, but I want to start with the emotional side. When we learn compassion meditation in Lojong, and we learn breathing out and giving happiness to beings and breathing in and removing their sufferings, we give ourselves some training in our Buddha nature and in our purpose and our real value and worth. We take our real value and worth and then build on that. And by training ourselves in love and having a loving response. And one of the people we can have a loving response toward is ourselves. So when we feel the anxiety, we can, at that moment, imagine using the techniques of Lojong or mind training. We can imagine, may my anxiety contain the anxiety of all sentient beings. And by my working, through this moment of anxiety, may I and all beings be free from it. And may we all become Buddhas, which is the ultimate freedom from anxiety. So in this way, we work with the anxiety from the inside. We think, okay, it's a natural human feeling. I'm not going to ignore it. That danger is real. I'm going to stay away from it. And yes, that cause of stress is real. But what happens after the first moment, you see, remember habits, remember what Tralek Rinpoche said, we're still working with this idea of habits being involuntary. So when a stressor happens in our life, of course, we're going to feel stressed. We've been trained our whole lives to see stressors as stressors and to actually be able to disengage from them. That's part of how we learn. And so we're not going to ignore that, but we're not going to dwell there. And I think that's the important point here. Our Buddhist training tells us it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, but you don't have to live there. You don't have to refresh that particular website over and over and over again. If you feel so this is why the techniques and methods of Lojong or mind training are very valuable for situations of emotional distress, because the technique is, may my feeling, my scared feeling or my anxious feeling contain the anxiety of all beings. And by my taking it on their behalf, may they be free. May I be free. May we all be free of this. And may eventually we become Buddhists, which is the absolute transcendence of this feeling. And earlier, the question regarding guilt, you can do that with your feelings of guilt. May my guilt contain the guilt of all sentient beings, and by my working through this feeling of guilt, may I and all beings be free of it. Just repeating the method and technique sometimes takes the power away from that habit, that habitual thought. Even if you can just think that for a moment and take away some of the energy of that habitual thought, you're going to be farther ahead. So this is something that a person can do working with things like anxiety and guilt. I do have one more thing to say about guilt, however, and that is that when someone undergoes a life change, like retirement or buying a new house or any other major change in one's life, there's my own psychotherapist told me that there's like a 6-month period of time for initial adjustment to a major life change, where we're trying on for size a different self-identity, because even though we're Buddhist and even though we're training, we still have a self-identity from when we were kids, and we're still practicing that habit. So we've got to try to work with that habit and try to make that habit a healthy one until we can go beyond it and transcend it through our spiritual practice. So we do have to have the relative self-worth and the relative habits of thinking and emotions that will help us to regulate our emotions so that we're not too far off one way or the other until we can reach Buddhahood. Until we get there, we have to have all of these things. One of my friends who's a psychotherapist told me that first 6 months is really, really difficult because we're trying a lot of new identities on for size. What will I do with my time? What will I do with my energy? What's my life about? And it depends on how old we are and what our value system is, what we end up deciding. Because if we're more mature and we have the sense that our Buddha nature is the most important thing, then we'll emphasize that. But that doesn't mean that we're not human and that we don't need to balance our time. So for example, Sita Rinpoche himself says, look, I'm an artist. He said, so I do art. That's my recreation. And I'm a human being. So I need recreation. And so I'm going to give myself a certain amount of time for recreation. But I am also not going to do recreation at the expense of my Dharma practice, which is the most important thing to me. And so he says it's up to us to come up with our own balance for the external components of our life, time, and energy. We know what we need, we know what hurts, and we know what helps. And so we have to try to find a way to balance that. Unfortunately, we don't have a magic set of scales inside ourselves to tell us how much is enough and how much is too much. So there will be trial and error as we first work through this. Anyhow, sorry, that was a little side topic, but I wanted to make sure I covered that point. And now finally, the 17th century text. So Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said one time that if we get really good at meditation, over time, he said, we will be able to bring our mind to rest at all kinds of times. And that we'll actually even be able to let our mind come to rest in the midst of an experience, like a strong emotion or whatever. And then we will see the nature of that strong emotion clearly and purely. And he said, and once you get good at that, he said, then you also need to be at the same time working on the idea that the things that appear in your mind are your mind. So I often use the example of the tree outside my window because I have an 80-foot oak tree just outside my window. And I look at that tree and that tree appears in my mind. But the tree that's appearing in my mind is not an object. It's not a solid object. It's an experience. It's a fleeting experience. And it's mental. It might be a really strong experience because it's based on what I can see with my eyes. But it's an experience in my mind nonetheless. So that tree, from the ultimate point of view, doesn't exist, except as an experience in my mind. Somebody just gave me a watch as a gift. I don't own this watch, even if I would have my name engraved on the inside. All I own is my impression of that watch. Even though I'm married, I don't own my husband. I only own my impression of him, and so on and so forth. And so if we become accustomed to this new habit of trying to recognize the nature of things as they're happening, and to recognize that appearances are appearing in the mind, and the mind itself is not a thing, and that those two facts are not separate from another, but arise simultaneously. It appears and it's empty at the same time. It appears and it's empty, same time. Then all things, all phenomena, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche used the words, all phenomena announce their emptiness. Now, that's a little hard for me to take in, but all phenomena announcing their lack of existence, lack of true own being. That's a pretty amazing thing. And in that way, all phenomena would become a prompt for resting one's mind in its own nature and bringing that Buddha nature that we all have gradually to its fruition. So the core of our self-worth is the fact that we have Buddha nature. And through practice, we can bring it out. And we can also see that Buddha nature in other beings and see that they don't recognize it and have compassion for them. I'm going to read a little bit from this 17th century text. Let's see. Oh yeah, it says, let the mind remain free from the activity of hope and fear and rest in the great vast space that transcends conceptual mind. I just love that. It says, let the mind remain free from the activity of expectation and fear, expectation and hope and fear, and rest the mind in the great vast space that transcends conceptual mind. And then it says all things appearing are manifestations of the guru of sign, S-I-G-N, sign. And what that means is that we've all heard the story from the life of the Buddha, where he made a gesture toward a student, and that gesture caused the student in that moment to experience enlightenment. Who would not want to receive a teaching like that? We would all love to receive a teaching like that, but it takes a very long time and a lot of positive karma to form a relationship with a teacher in such a way that the teacher's mere appearance or gestures could bring about enlightenment for us. It takes a lot of time and good karma and everything else for that to happen. But who wouldn't love that? But what Rinpoche is pointing at, and what this 17th century text is pointing at, is that once we train really, really well in recognizing our nature, once we train really, really well, then even ordinary appearances are our guru pointing out their nature to us. We recognize their appearance and their emptiness simultaneously. And this is what's known as co-emergent wisdom. And right now we have co-emergent confusion. Everything seems solid and real, but over time, if we train in shamatha, which is tranquility meditation, compassion meditation through lojong, and then the off the cushion lojong, where we use our own emotions to train to have love and compassion for ourselves and others and aspire to Buddhahood. And then gradually learn how to rest our mind in itself, first in those moments between thoughts and meditation, then in the gaps that occur in our everyday life, and then finally to examine the mind itself and see what it is and see that all things appear in the mind. These are all very valuable skills that we learn in order to actualize that core of our self-worth. So that's where I'm going to stop today. But I really appreciate the opportunity, excuse me, to talk about this, because I think these days it's really hard, because there's a lot of people who act badly, and a lot of people who act in a cruel and punitive way toward others. And it's very hard for us to see our self-worth when we feel that others are cruel toward us and are punishing us. And it's really hard to see their value and their potential Buddhahood. But because we've taken the Bodhisattva motivation as our motivation, we've taken that person who is being mean to us, we've taken that person's liberation as our cause. While we may not want to live with that sort of person, and we may need to be absent from that kind of person in order to grow, it's all right, because we will never stop caring for them from the Bodhisattva point of view, and never stop wishing and hoping for their awakening. So, okay, thank you for your patience while I put that together. And we have some time, so if you'd like to unmute and have a conversation, we can do that. So, yes.
I just want to make sure I'm thinking of this correctly. I pulled it out of past training, but when I think of stuff, trees and whatever it might be, as empty, what I do with that is what I've learned. I checking out the accuracy is that I think, well, the tree is really not a tree. I mean, it's bark, it's cells, it's insects, it's rain, it's water.
Mhm.
You can just keep teasing out and out and out until probably there's nothing, Buddha nature.
Right.
Is that how one should effectively approach that emptiness of what's around us?
There are many different methods for doing that. There's more than one method. So you can try the different ones and see which ones work for you best. The method that you're describing there is indeed one method. And it's a deconstruction, an intellectual or analytical deconstruction of phenomena as being made of parts, and the parts themselves not being the parts themselves being impermanent. So that's definitely a method. That's definitely that's one of the methods that's mentioned in Trungpa Rinpoche's books, because Trungpa Rinpoche talks a lot about this in his books. And so since Trungpa Rinpoche talks about it, I think that that's definitely one of it's a method that can be used. And then he said that method can be used. He said, from his point of view, he prefers a different method. And that different method is establishing that all things appear in the mind and that the mind itself is not a thing. And that way, he said, you don't have to resolve the emptiness of every exterior thing you see. You don't have to see something and then resolve its emptiness and then see another thing and then resolve its emptiness and then see another external thing and resolve its emptiness and then see another external thing and resolve its emptiness. You don't have to continuously resolve the emptiness of all external things you experience. He said you could do that, and that's fine. It's acceptable and good. He said, but it might be faster. It might be faster and more convenient to look at the mind that's experiencing all of those external phenomena and see that it's empty. So you're on the right track. You're on the right track. And you definitely can use that method. At the same time, it will be good. At the same time, you're doing that external method. That's good. But at the same time, it's great to train in the internal method, which is looking at the mind that's experiencing those external objects and seeing what that is. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and that's what, and I think it was I'm looking at my bookshelf because it's like chock full of books. Yeah. Anyway, if I would show you my bookcase, it would also show you the mess in my room. So we're not going there. But in his book, Vivid Awareness, Trungpa Rinpoche talks about this specific thing, which is you can resolve the emptiness of things externally by deconstructing them externally and seeing they're all impermanent and so forth. He said, however, it's more efficient to do the internal one. And then he explains the internal one and so forth. The internal method of deconstruction this internal method of recognizing that all things are mind in itself is not a thing, that these two understandings are not separate, and so on. That comes in this book, The Great Path of Awakening. It's taught in the section and near the beginning of the book on ultimate bodhicitta. In this 2005 edition, it starts on page 10 with the discussion of the actual practice training in bodhicitta. And then he gives a 4-part meditation. It's the 12th century slogans of Chikawa Yeshe Dorje. He wrote 59 mind training slogans back in the 12th century. And then 5 of those 59 slogans, actually 6, but let's just talk about 5 right now, have to do with the training in ultimate bodhicitta, which is this understanding of emptiness, right? So the first 4 of the 5 are your on the cushion instructions. Think of all phenomena as being dreamlike. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. May even the remedy be free to subside naturally and then rest in the nature of all the bases of everything. And so that explains a 4-step meditation process that a person can do to resolve the empty nature of appearances in one's mind. And then the 5th slogan is, in post-meditation, be a child of illusion, which means that while you are walking around in everyday life, then you can reflect. And this is something that is inside the technique that you're talking about. He said, while you're walking around your everyday life, foster, continue to foster the idea that all of those things, they may appear, but they're nothing, are nothing, and yet they appear. Be like a child of illusion, meaning that you know how the magic trick works, right? You know how the magic trick works, so you don't have to be fooled by it. So, you're right on with that. And yet another method, which I won't go into right now, but it is the methods of deity meditation. When a person learns deity meditation really, thoroughly, they are taught to see themselves as a Buddha all the time, and all things to be the inseparability of the 3. Oh gosh, I may be saying this wrong. So let me that everything is the inseparability. Everything you see is the inseparability of form, the deity, the deity's form and emptiness. All sound is like the mantra and emptiness, and all thought is awareness and emptiness. The 3 spheres, it's not the 3 spheres, darn it. Anyhow, it's in the 15th Karmapa's commentary on Chenrezig. They talk about these 3 things and how when you're doing deity practice, you see yourself as being the empty, light-made form of the deity, and that all sound is like the mantra, which is sound and emptiness, and all thought is awareness and emptiness. Anyway, so there are lots of ways to train, but those are 3 methods that I'm familiar with. So thanks for asking.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, awesome. Other questions that people might have. And if I can't see you, if I can't see you here, just unmute and say hi.
Hi. There's like in Mingyur Rinpoche's level 3 joy of living, they touch on the mirror gaze. Sorry, one of my dogs got a version of kennel cough, so you might hear some horrible noises. Okay, so I just lost the train of thought. So it just touches on the mirror gaze, where background, foreground, there's no distinction. And I don't know if it's correct to do this, but when something,
poor puppy.
So when times when I have worked on practicing that, it seems to me, Rookie, go away. Sorry.
It's all right. We can hear you.
Okay, so it seems to me that when I focus on something will come out of that merged foreground, background, where all things are sort of uniformly presented.
Mm-hmm.
Then when something does catch my eye, to me, I've been looking at that as I'm having a judgment about that, and that there's emotion and thought connected, that the eye is like somehow drawn to it, but I don't realize at that moment that I'm actually having a thought or a reaction to it. It's like the eye movement almost tells me first rather than my awareness. And I don't know if you have any comments on that or what.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the first I have heard of this particular type of practice. So I'm going to have to say I'm a little bit ignorant about it, but let's see if I can repeat it back to you and see if I understood it. Okay, so what you're saying is that in level 3 of the Joy of Living, Mingyur Rinpoche teaches a person to practice what's called the mirror gaze, where
it's only touched on as
oh,
a, it's just touched on. It's not really fully explained, but I've heard it in by other teachers where it's like 180, where you really just open. You're not using form. You're so
right.
I don't really know how to explain it, but
it's like a diffuse gaze. It's diffuse. You're not pinpointing anything. You're just
right.
gazing, not looking.
Yeah. And so then when I've done that and I've noticed, oh, something pops out, or even if I'm walking around trying to practice this, and I don't do it all the time, but it seems like I guess what my question is there a way to make it so before your eye is drawn to develop that ability to see what's going on in your mind, or is the eye always sort of ahead of our awareness?
I hear what you're saying. And the process of perception, is diagrammed, by the way. You can find this, and one of my other people on this call may know. Trungpa Rinpoche has written a number of presentations on the 8 consciousnesses. And I'm guessing that Mingyur Rinpoche, who's going to be teaching, if he hasn't already had his teaching on the 8 consciousnesses, it's supposed to happen either happen this past week or will happen soon. I would definitely recommend that people watch that, because just as when we were children in school, we learned how to diagram sentences to help us understand language. The Buddha taught the diagramming of perception as a way of understanding mind. And he said that the mind is a singular thing, but it has 8 functions. Now, there are different philosophies. There's another description of the Buddha's teachings that says there are only 6 consciousness. I'm not going to go there because I don't understand all that part. I'm not a scholar, but I understand the 8 consciousnesses model the best, because he explains that. Trungpa Rinpoche explains that in a lot of his books. The idea is that the organ of sight, which is your eye, is connected to your mind. It's not just sitting there all by itself. The organ of sight is not just there just sitting there in an undynamic way. It's actually dynamically engaging with the external, everything that's happening. And that our mind, we have an eye, EYE, eye consciousness, that connects to the organ of sight, that then conveys the information to the 6th consciousness, which is the mental consciousness, which then experiences it. And so this is so fast. This is happening so quickly that that the method that Trungpa Rinpoche gives, that is given in Great Path of Awakening, the method there, where you see that what appears in the mind is empty of solidity. And that's almost faster than trying to figure out which came first, the chicken or the egg, which came first, the perception or the experience of the perception. It's lightning quick. And there's no way that I could tell you. A scholar might be able to tell you whether the actual physical visual thing occurs first or not. Only a scholar who has studied these things could, or a meditation master who knows them from the inside, could answer that question with clarity. But what I can do is talk around it a bit, and tell you some places to look. And I would say it doesn't matter which occurs first. It really doesn't matter whether the chicken or the egg occurred first, because we have them both. So it doesn't really matter. But what matters is how you experience it in your mind. And so watching how you experience things, that's really interesting. And watching the mind in which appearances arise, and seeing that mind in which appearances arise never changes, no matter what's on it. You can look at something ugly, you can look at something beautiful, but as long as you look in a way that is non-grasping, it's not going to matter whether it's ugly or beautiful. Your mind is never going to change. This is pointed to, once again, in Great Path of Awakening, 2005 edition. I jokingly tell people this is the only book I've ever read. That's not true, but it's the only book I've read repeatedly. it's on page 51 of this book, and it's in the second part of the book where they talk about the teaching Serlengpa gave to Atisha. Serlengpa was the modern progenitor of Lojong teachings, who taught the great Indian master Atisha. When Atisha, inspired by a vision, Atisha had a vision of Tara, and she said, "Go to Indonesia and get these teachings from Serlengpa." And so he went to Indonesia and stayed with Serlengpa for like 12 years. Anyhow, so based on Serlengpa's teachings, here's a verse from Serlengpa. Turn error right around and look right in. Relax completely and rest comfortably. Not being held, they will go freely. And then Jamgon Khantrul the Great writes an explanation of what these three lines mean. He says, if you follow any thought or emotion, major or minor, and let your mind wander outward, your work is in error and you are no different from a person who's never learned Dharma. I mean, you know, then so he says, turn your attention right in and look right at your mind when you experience something. When you look at it, nothing is seen. Relax completely, let everything go, and rest in that state of emptiness. No matter how many thoughts or emotions there are, when they aren't held, they go freely on their own and become the accumulation of pristine wisdom. This instruction is the essence of meditation on ultimate bodhicitta. So, these things, that's why we can think about and conceive of, as the 17th century author did, everything being the guru of sign. Because if we allow our mind, if we let our mind, you know what I'm saying? So I think you're onto something. In other words, I think you're onto something.
And I mean, again, it always comes back to relax. Don't worry about it. The mind always wants to try to find a way to say, this is better, that's better, and it's not.
And you know what, I hear that, but where it really comes down to is it's actually okay, because the person who's asking that question doesn't exist. I mean, so you're fine. I mean, why? Yeah, I know, but you know what I'm saying. But it's actually fine, because every step that we take, and what you're describing is steps you're taking and steps you're making. So every step gets us closer to understanding. And every question gets us closer to understanding. And every moment, I mean, we have to have, we can't be totally undisciplined. We have to have the correct view. We have to have the correct view. Otherwise, our meditation's not going to go well. So what you're asking are view questions so that you can make sure you've got that down. And then once you get that down, then the meditation becomes easier. So all of this is good, because all of this is working toward lifting our burdens, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? And I will pray for Puppy. What's our puppy's name?
It's Mercury. He's on antibiotics.
God love him.
They go to dog daycare twice a week, so I guess he got it there.
He got it daycare. I'm telling you, daycare, it's just a thing. Okay, yeah. Thanks, dear.
Called my respite care.
I got it. Yeah, thank you. I've got time for one more. Is there one more out there? Let's see. If there's more than one, I'll stay longer, but let's just see. Yeah.
I can. I wanted to interject this anyway with your dialogue with Amy just now, but I had sort of a teaching on Thursday night that came to me. Karen came through Iowa City, where I have the condo where I, work there. And so it was a rare occasion we ordered DoorDash, so I agreed to meet this person out in the parking lots by my condo. Well, the headlights come up, and I heard him kind of say something about, did you order? I'm approaching. He goes, get away from me. He goes, did you order or did you not? He's hollering at me already. And I said, yeah, you're DoorDash. I ordered something. But I'm reaching out to the window. There's still safe distance here. I'm wearing a mask. He goes, get away. Get away.
Oh.
And I'm trying to, meditation is kicking in here. I'm saying, well, you have sort of a thorny problem in front of you, because somehow you have to hand this off to me right now. He goes, you will stay over there. I'll put it on something, So I said, okay, this car is my wife's car. You can put it on the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
He pulls away. He was rude even when I said thank you at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so my initial response is lots of ego.
Yeah.
I am resentful. I paid for this just to,
Yeah.
be treated like a moron in front of. And so I can't gloss this over with some Dharma picture where I could see the greater
Yeah.
meaning of it all.
Sure.
And then I thought, what a great teaching this is, that he just humiliated me. This is a way to, I found my ego. What a great guy.
Yeah. There you go.
And, so, it was all on the foundation, though, of just being thoroughly humiliated in a basic human way of being a worthless kind of person. And of course, I could stand back and say, well, it looked like he had an anxiety disorder and
Yeah.
et cetera. He
Mm.
might do better as a night watchman than as a DoorDash
Yeah.
delivery guy. But so this seemed apropos of everything you were saying, though, that this was a wonderful teaching about emptiness, and I could cherish it, in the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
I can't
Yeah.
say at the time I was kind of working.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. I super appreciate you sharing this because I remember one time Kempo Karthar Rinpoche said that he said in the old days, people would go to their teachers and they would say, "Teacher, please tell me about all of my faults. Please tell me all of my faults so I know what I have to work on." And Rinpoche said, he said, if somebody comes to me right now and asks me that, I'm going to go, I don't think so, because, what is it? That line from the movie, you can't handle the truth, I mean, right? So,
Uh-huh.
since we can't handle the truth about who we are and we're not really ready to accept it even from our teacher, we're going to have to get it from these other sources, and it's a problem, but there we are. And we can actually think that this is our guru teaching us. And so that's something that's taught in the Mahamudra Nundro commentary by Jamgon Khantrul, the Great, The Torch of Certainty, where he says that, these things are your guru teaching you. Your guru is appearing in all of these ways, teaching you these ways. And if you think of it that way, then you can be grateful for the experience. Although, as you say, when it's happening, you're totally not grateful for it, but there you have it. Thanks for explaining that or sharing that. Anybody else have something they want to say or share or yes, Christine.
I thank you for doing this, and it's good to see everybody again. This is an unrelated question to Dharma, but how is the rebuilding of the center going?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, is there a way to make a donation to the building fund if you still want that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank
Give
you
a
for asking. Woo, thank you. Thank you for asking. Let me do something here. I'm going to quickly I'm going to put it in chat. Can you guys read chat okay?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can. Where did you go? Columbus KTC. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it. Oh, I know where to find it. Wait a minute. I made a note of this and I copied it. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Haha. Okay. Now I'm going to put this in chat, and this is a way to make donations to Columbus KTC. You can copy it out of chat. Let's see if it appeared. There it goes. And that is our donation link. It takes you directly to PayPal, where then you sign in and you tell how much you want to give. And so that's something you can do. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for asking about that. And okay, the brief rundown is that in the summer of this past summer, like June, July, we found a new contractor that gave us a better price than the previous one. And and so we were going to start construction in the fall, but we were $525,000 short. And our project manager, we hired a person with contracting experience that does this for a living. He was our project manager representing us. Sometimes they call them an owner representative. Anyhow, our project manager said, if you put this off, if you put off construction because you don't have the $500,000, he said, you're going to be chasing this number forever. Because when you raise it, the next year, next season, it'll go up that much. And so we talked to Lama Karma at KTD Monastery about that. And he said, go for it, go for it. And we made arrangements with a private situation to borrow some money if we needed it. And we also got a bank loan for $200,000 because that's all they would loan us, because churches are not a good risk. So we got a promise from a particular situation. There was a group of people who said they would loan us the remaining $300,000 if we needed it, and so then we started construction on September 8th.
All right.
And so we had broken ground last year in a special ceremony, so in any case. But we had the construction, and right now the 3 of the 4 walls are halfway up, and we've got the foundations in. 3 of the 4 walls are up. They're starting to lay the steel beams that will hold up the 2nd floor, and so we are looking at next spring for completion. And we've had a really fortunate fundraising year this year. It does appear at this moment that we have raised the $325,000 needed. We had a lot of really generous people step up. And so now we won't have to borrow the $325,000. Woohoo. We'll still have to take out the $200,000 loan. However, so any funds that people give us now, we can now breathe easy, that all we will have is a monthly mortgage payment rather than a mortgage payment and then this private loan, so it's like, now we don't have to worry, we can just keep going. And so if you want to look at how we're doing, now you may not be on Facebook. A lot of people aren't. If you're on Facebook, you can look up Columbus KTC on Facebook and see videos and pictures of the construction. We don't have as many on our website, but you can go there and see. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you asking. And every dollar you give now will reduce the amount of money we have to borrow. And we also are going to have to do a fundraiser next year to pay for all the sacred objects. We're getting our statues for free. We're getting like 3 statues for absolutely free. And Kemp Rinpoche also planned all kinds of draperies and brocades for us. We have all of that. That's free, but we don't have the shrine furniture to put it on. We don't have the cabinetry. We haven't paid for that. We don't even know where we're going to get it yet. So we're trying to work on all that now, and then we'll do a fundraiser for that next year. So there's always going to be something, there's always going to be something, right? So there you go.
Congratulations.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. It was scary to go ahead and start digging that dirt, but we did it anyhow. So we felt we had the promise and the from our teachers and so forth, and so yay. Anybody else have anything?
Just a quick question.
Yes, please.
I know I'd heard from you a while back ago how much you adored your Mickey Mouse watch. So I'm wondering if your new watch is a Mickey Mouse watch.
Here's the story. Here's the story. A friend of mine got a new Apple Watch and he gave me his old one. So yes, it has Minnie Mouse on it, but yeah, it has Minnie Mouse on it. And in fact, the first thing, I can't really show it on camera here, but then she'll talk to you.
It's 11:51. Good morning.
So hearing Minnie Mouse speak to you every day is really entertaining. But my husband had been after me to get one of these watches, but I didn't want to give up my Mickey Mouse watch. I just didn't. And so the next best thing I could do to try to use this amazing gift that somebody gave me is, to do that with it. So thanks for asking. These things are very important. I may have told you this before, Judy, but somebody asked me like, why do you wear a Mickey Mouse watch? And it's, I said, well, there's two reasons. Number one, it delights me to no end. And number two, it lets people know when they meet me, they can never really be 100% sure about me, because it's like, okay, she sounds okay, but she's wearing that watch, you know? So anyway, it has been a conversation piece. And so, so the fact that the Apple Watch does, I mean, it does have an always on feature, but I don't use it. But anyway, so you could always see Mickey or Minnie in this case. Well, I really, I'm going to have to go here because I have another engagement, but it's been fantastic to visit with you, and I'm so happy to hear about your practice and how you're doing, and to see you all looking so well. And we'll pray for Puppy to get better, and just I'm hoping for all of you to that everything goes well for you, and that we meet again, and all of that. So I'll do a quick dedication of merit here. I was hoping we could sit a little bit, but at this point, we're just going to have to dedicate and sit quietly for a moment after that. We gathered together all of this merit together and dedicated to all sentient beings in general, specifically for those people who are really struggling right now, and also for everyone on this call, that they may have long life, good health, and good Dharma activity and practice. And I'll recite the short prayer in English. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks
Great.
so much. Thanks for organizing this, guys.
Oh,
Tim.
it's a labor of love. Yeah.
All right.
Wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Lama Kathy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And I'll see you again. Om Mani Padme
Bye,
Hum.
everybody.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
Mani Padme Hum. Bye.